Here you are, in the most peaceful place in the forest you could ever imagine. You are completely safe here. My tree friends and I are watching over you, wrapping you in a gentle, protective energy. How did you find us? Did you feel the pull of our energy from miles away? Did you follow the paths of our roots? Or maybe someone whispered to you about this magical place. No matter how you arrived, you're welcome to stay as long as you like. Lie down, get comfortable, and let me guide you to sleep as I tell you why this place is so special. You're not the first to rest here. All the people in the comments section have also drifted off in this exact spot. Take a moment to look around. Many of them are peacefully dreaming or gently beginning to drift away. Some from the USA, others from Europe. We also have listeners from South Africa and Japan. Where are you from? What time is it there? Is something keeping you awake? Make sure to answer this in the comments section and to subscribe. Isn't it incredible to think about how many people from all over the world are here together in this serene space? Over there, for example, is Spike Spiegel 2162, who just had a fun night out with friends at the club and is trying to fall asleep while his room still spins. And over there is It's Just Val from Ohio, who's preparing for a good rest before starting their night shift. Seed Hound from Somerville, South Carolina, just experienced a rare 4 inches of snow last night. Such a beautiful scene to fall asleep to. This is a space where everyone can feel safe and at peace. Together, we create a sanctuary, a place to share tips, stories, and comfort. So let's relax, let go, and drift off together. Let me tell you a little story. A story about this magical forest where you've found yourself tonight. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let your imagination guide you. Feel the ground beneath you, soft and welcoming, and the golden leaves above gently swaying in the breeze. You're safe here, completely safe. They call this place the Dream Keeper's Forest. It's said to exist beyond the edges of the waking world, somewhere between here and there, between now and forever. It's a place that only those who truly need it can find. No map will lead you here, no signposts to follow, just the pull of its calming energy, like a whisper in your soul guiding you home. The trees here are ancient, their roots stretching deep into the earth, connecting the forest to places far beyond. Every tree is alive with its own quiet magic, and its leaves shimmer under the light of the full moon. They say these trees hold the dreams of everyone who has ever rested here, their branches cradling peaceful memories and long-forgotten wishes. As you lie here, you might feel the gentle hum of the forest around you. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The soft rustle of the leaves above, the distant chirping of crickets, and the quiet sigh of the breeze weaving through the branches. This is the forest's song, a lullaby meant just for you. The trees are not just ancient, they are protectors. If an unpleasant dream dares to approach you, don't worry. The trees will sense it. Their golden leaves are not just beautiful, they are guardians. They will draw the dream away, gently sucking it into the leaf's veins, and then, with a soft flutter, they will release the leaf into the wind, carrying the bad dream far, far away. You might even hear the faint sound of a leaf drifting down, a soft whisper as it falls, freeing you from anything troubling. This is why so many people have come to this forest over the years, seeking its magic and peace. You're not the first to rest here, and you certainly won't be the last. All the people in the comments section have found themselves in this same spot, soothed by the trees, the moonlight, and the quiet magic of this place. Each person has their own story, their own reason for coming here. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Feel the soft embrace of the earth beneath you, cradling you like a favorite blanket. Above you, the golden leaves shimmer in the moonlight, casting a gentle glow that feels like a warm hug. The trees are whispering to you now, their voices soft and soothing, like the sound of waves lapping at a distant shore. They want you to know that you're not alone. This forest is alive with connection, a sanctuary where everyone is linked through the magic of the trees. No matter where you're from, no matter what time it is where you are, this moment is yours, a moment of peace, shared with others from around the world who are here, just like you, to rest and let go. As you lie here, you might notice the faint glow of fireflies weaving through the air, their light pulsing softly like the beat of a quiet heart. The forest feels alive tonight, doesn't it? Every sound, every flicker of light, every soft rustle of leaves seems to carry a message. You are safe. You are welcome. You belong here. And now it's time to drift. The trees are watching over you, their golden leaves swaying gently above. If any worries linger in your mind, let the trees take them. Imagine the leaves reaching down, brushing away the thoughts and wrapping you in calm. Feel yourself growing lighter, as if the weight of the day is melting away. The ground beneath you is so soft, so inviting, like the most comfortable bed you've ever known. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and earth and moonlight. The golden leaves above begin to blur in your vision as your eyelids grow heavy. The rustling of the forest becomes softer, quieter, fading into a gentle hum. The Dreamkeeper's forest has you now, cradling you in its arms, its trees guarding you as you drift deeper and deeper. This is your place of peace, a place where the worries of the day can't follow, where dreams are gentle and safe, and where you are never alone. Sleep well, dear dreamer. In the meantime, I will tell you some stories of the people who have visited this place. Like the wanderer and the lost map, he had been walking for what felt like years, his boots scuffed and worn, his coat frayed at the edges. In his hands was a weathered map, its edges tattered and worn, its lines faded from years of tracing and retracing. The map was his guide, his compass, his one constant in a life of endless searching. For as long as he could remember, he had followed the lines of that map, tracing its paths through valleys and over mountains, across rivers that shimmered like silver under the sun. But no matter how far he travelled, no matter how closely he followed its intricate markings, the map never led him to what he was looking for. The truth was, he didn't know exactly what he was searching for. Was it a home, a sense of belonging? Perhaps simply rest, a chance to set down his burdens and let the world pass by just for a moment. He only knew that the map demanded he keep moving. But that night, something changed. The moon hung low in the sky, full and luminous, casting a silver light over the quiet landscape. The stars burned brightly, scattered like diamonds against the vast darkness. The air was cool and smelled of pine and earth, a scent that felt both foreign and strangely familiar, like the echo of a forgotten dream. At the edge of the horizon, the forest appeared. It rose out of the landscape as though it had always been there, an expanse of towering trees silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Their golden leaves shimmered faintly, glowing like embers in the night. He stopped in his tracks, staring at the forest's edge. It wasn't on the map. He unrolled the paper, his hands trembling slightly. He scanned its surface, looking for any sign, any mark, any hint of this place. But the map showed nothing. Just empty space where the forest now stood, alive and humming with quiet energy. He hesitated. The forest was an unknown, an unmarked destination, and the map had always been his guide. Without it, where would he go? How would he know the way? But as he stood there, the forest seemed to call to him. It wasn't a sound exactly, more of a feeling, a vibration that resonated deep in his chest, pulling him forward. The golden leaves rustled softly in the breeze, and the hum of the forest grew louder, more insistent. He took a step forward, then another step, and another. Before he knew it, he had crossed the threshold into the forest's embrace. The air was softer here, warmer, and carried a stillness that felt sacred. The trees stood tall and ancient, their trunks thick and knotted with age. Above, their golden leaves glowed faintly, casting a warm light that danced across the forest floor. It was not the harsh light of day or the cold glow of the moon, but something entirely its own, gentle, inviting, serene. He walked slowly, his boots sinking into the mossy ground. The path twisted and turned like a river, and he followed it without question. He didn't know where he was going, but for the first time in a long time, that didn't seem to matter. As he walked deeper into the forest, the map began to feel heavy in his hand. He glanced down and saw the lines and markings begin to fade, the ink dissolving as though washed away by invisible rain. His breath caught in his throat. The map was all he had known, his one constant, his compass in an ever-changing world. Without it, who was he? How would he find his way? But as the last line vanished, leaving the page blank, he felt something unexpected. Relief. The forest guided him now. Its paths wound through glowing trees and alongside streams that shimmered with a faint blue light. He passed flowers that opened and closed like living things, their petals glowing softly in the moonlight. Every step felt deliberate, inevitable, as though the forest itself had been waiting for him to arrive. Eventually, the path led him to a clearing. The space was surrounded by the tallest trees he had ever seen, their golden leaves glowing brighter here than anywhere else in the forest. In the center was a patch of soft grass, almost like a bed waiting just for him. He hesitated, looking around as though expecting someone to appear. But the forest was quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves above. Slowly he lowered himself to the ground, sinking into the moss. It was softer than he had imagined, cradling him as though it had been shaped to fit his body perfectly. For the first time in years, he felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease, the weight in his chest beginning to lift. Above him, the golden leaves swayed gently in the breeze, their glow pulsing faintly like the rhythm of a heartbeat. The forest began to hum again, and the sound was different now, deeper, richer, like a melody just on the edge of hearing. It wasn't a song he recognized, but it felt familiar all the same, like a lullaby from a long-forgotten childhood. He closed his eyes. The dream came softly, like mist rolling in over a quiet lake. He was standing in a golden field, the sun warm on his face. A small cottage stood at the edge of the field, its windows glowing softly and smoke curling lazily from its chimney. As he approached, the scent of fresh bread filled the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of wildflowers. The door opened, and inside he saw faces he hadn't seen in years. Family, friends, people he had lost and left behind. His chest ached with longing. He stepped inside, tears streaming down his face as he was wrapped in hugs and laughter, as if the warmth of that moment could erase the miles and years of loneliness he had carried. The room was bathed in a soft golden light, like the glow of the forest outside. The air was warm and welcoming, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread and something faintly floral, lavender perhaps, or the memory of spring blossoms. It was a small cottage, but it felt impossibly expansive, as though it could stretch to fit everything he had ever missed. The first person to embrace him was his mother. She had the same soft smile he remembered from his childhood, the same kind eyes that seemed to hold the entire world in their gaze. She held him tightly, her hands gentle but firm on his back, as if she were afraid he might disappear if she let go. "My boy," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. He couldn't speak, couldn't find the words. All he could do was hold her, burying his face in her shoulder and breathing in her familiar scent, a mixture of flower, soap, and something uniquely hers. For the first time in years, he felt like a child again, safe and cared for. When she finally released him, his father was there, waiting with open arms. His father's embrace was different, stronger, sturdier, but no less comforting. He clapped him on the back and laughed, a deep, hearty sound that seemed to shake the walls. "You've grown into a fine man," his father said, his voice gruff but full of pride. "But you've always been my boy." His sister, her hair still tied back in the same braid she'd worn as a girl, pulled him into a playful hug, laughing as she ruffled his hair. "Still taller than me," she said with mock indignation, though her grin betrayed her joy. "Not by much," he replied, his voice cracking with emotion. He turned to see his grandparents seated at a wooden table by the window. His grandmother was knitting, her hands steady despite her years, while his grandfather sat with a steaming cup of tea, his eyes crinkling with delight as he looked up. "There's my favorite grandson," his grandfather teased, though he'd said the same to every grandchild. "Come here, sweetheart," his grandmother said, setting her knitting aside. She took his hands in hers, her touch cool and soothing, and kissed his cheek. "You look tired, but you're here now. That's all that matters." The room seemed to fill with more and more loved ones. Old friends he hadn't seen since childhood appeared, their laughter ringing out as they shared stories of long-ago adventures. A cousin he hadn't spoken to in years embraced him, apologizing for the time they'd lost, but promising to make up for it. Even his childhood dog trotted into the room, its tail wagging furiously as it bounded toward him. "Buddy," he exclaimed, kneeling to wrap his arms around the dog. Its fur was just as soft as he remembered, and its enthusiastic licks brought a laugh to his lips, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in far too long. The table was soon set with food, though he didn't remember anyone preparing it. There were loaves of fresh bread, their crusts golden and warm to the touch. Bowls of fruit glistened in the light, each piece impossibly ripe and colourful. There were steaming stews, hearty and fragrant, and cakes dusted with powdered sugar, their sweetness wafting through the air. "Sit, sit," his mother urged, pulling out a chair for him. "You've been on your feet for too long." And as he did, he felt the weight of his journey finally begin to lift. Plates were passed around, laughter and conversation filled the air, and the warmth of the room seemed to wrap around him like a blanket. Every bite of food was like a memory, each flavor carrying him back to moments he thought he'd forgotten. The bread tasted like rainy afternoons spent in the kitchen with his mother, kneading dough and waiting for the loaves to rise. The fruit was as sweet as the summers of his childhood, when he and his sister would climb trees and pluck ripe plums from the branches. And the laughter, it was the most nourishing thing of all. It was light and genuine, free of the heaviness he had carried for so long. He found himself laughing too, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside him, as though it had been waiting all this time for permission to be heard. As the evening wore on, the conversation grew quieter, the mood shifting to something softer and more intimate. His father told stories of their family's past, tales of resilience and love that made him feel proud to be a part of something so enduring. His grandmother shared old songs, her voice thin but steady, and everyone joined in, their harmonies filling the space with a sense of unity. At one point, his sister leaned over and whispered, "You've been gone a long time. Did you think we wouldn't wait for you?" He looked at her, his throat tight with emotion. "I didn't know if I'd ever find my way back." "You did," she said simply, her hand resting on his. "And that's all that matters." The fire in the hearth crackled softly, its glow casting warm shadows on the walls. He leaned back in his chair, his body heavy with contentment. Around him, the room seemed to blur at the edges, the golden light blending with the soft murmurs of his loved ones' voices. When he finally drifted off to sleep, he dreamed not of faraway places or endless roads, but of this moment, this room, these people, this feeling of belonging. It was a dream he would carry with him forever, a memory that would anchor him no matter where his journey took him next. The wanderer had found what he didn't know he was searching for. Not a place, not a destination, but a home in the hearts of those who loved him. Then there was the sleepless musician. Music was her life. The violin had always been her companion, its strings a gateway to emotions she couldn't express with words. But lately her gift felt like a burden. The melodies wouldn't stop. They played on an endless loop in her mind, a tangled web of restless creativity that wouldn't let her rest. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't silence them. At night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the music would grow louder, its harmonies and counterpoints swirling like an unstoppable storm. Sleep became a distant memory, something she longed for but couldn't grasp. One evening, in the haze of her exhaustion, she found herself inside the forest. The world was alive with sound. It wasn't overwhelming like the chaos of her thoughts. It was soft and harmonious, a symphony composed of the rustling leaves, the distant trickle of a stream, and the soft hum of the wind weaving through the branches. The forest seemed to breathe, its rhythm steady and calming, like the slow bowing of a string against the violin. She walked carefully, her boots barely making a sound on the mossy ground. The golden leaves above cast a warm, flickering light that lit her path. As she wandered, the melodies in her mind began to soften. The tangled storm of notes and phrases that had kept her awake for weeks seemed to untangle themselves, folding into the soft hum of the forest. Her hand moved instinctively to her violin case. She hesitated for a moment, then opened it, her fingers brushing over the smooth wood of the instrument. It felt cool and familiar, as though it had been waiting for her touch. She placed the violin against her shoulder and drew the bow across its strings. The sound was soft, tentative at first, but as it resonated through the forest, it grew fuller, richer. It hung in the air like mist, blending seamlessly with the hum of the trees. The forest seemed to respond, its golden leaves swaying gently, their glow pulsing in time with her music. She began to play. The melody wasn't one she had rehearsed or planned. It wasn't one of the unfinished compositions that had plagued her mind for weeks. It was something entirely new, simple, pure, and unforced. It flowed through her like water, as if it had always been there, waiting to be discovered. As she played, the forest came alive around her. Fireflies appeared, their tiny lights flickering in harmony with her notes. The stream's gentle flow became a soft accompaniment, its rhythm blending perfectly with her tempo. The farther she walked, the more she felt herself letting go. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift, and the music in her mind grew quiet. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't chasing a song. She was simply playing, letting the violin sing without effort or expectation. Eventually, the path led her to a clearing. It was the heart of the forest, a space surrounded by the tallest trees she had ever seen. Their golden leaves glowed brighter here than anywhere else, casting the clearing in a warm, ethereal light. She lowered herself onto the soft moss in the center of the clearing. her violin resting in her lap. The forest seemed to listen, its hum deepening as she began to play again. Her music filled the space, weaving with the forest's sounds to create a symphony unlike anything she had ever imagined. As the last note faded into the air, she leaned back, letting the violin rest gently beside her. She closed her eyes, her body sinking into the soft moss. The sounds of the forest washed over her, the rustling leaves, the faint trill of distant birds, the quiet hum of the wind. It was a lullaby, soothing her in a way that no song of her own had ever done. For the first time in weeks, her mind was quiet. The unrelenting storm of melodies and harmonies that had kept her awake was gone, replaced by the gentle rhythm of the forest. She began to dream. In her dream, she wasn't holding the violin. She was standing on the shore of a vast, calm lake. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of rain. She stood at the edge of the lake, her toes sinking into the soft, cool sand. The water was impossibly still, a perfect mirror reflecting the golden trees that surrounded her. Everything about this place felt peaceful, effortless. For the first time in years, there was no rush, no pressure, no need to create or perform. She simply stood there, barefoot, her arms loose at her sides, watching as the sunlight danced across the water's surface. Then, as she gazed at the lake, something began to form in its reflection. At first it was faint, just the smallest ripple disturbing the stillness. But slowly, shapes started to emerge, growing clearer and more defined with each passing moment. The first image was of herself as a child, no older than 6, holding her first violin. It was far too big for her, and she struggled to tuck it under her chin properly. She giggled as the bow screeched against the strings, her little hands fumbling to find the right positions. Her mother was sitting nearby, trying to stifle her laughter behind her hand, while her father clapped enthusiastically as though it were the finest music he had ever heard. The memory shifted. She saw herself a little older now, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her school's music room. Around her were other kids with mismatched instruments, a trumpet blaring in one corner, a flute squeaking in another. It was chaotic, but it was fun. She remembered the way her music teacher had joked that their first performance would probably scare away the audience. The teacher had a way of making music feel magical but never too serious. She used to call the violinists string wizards, and they'd spent one whole class pretending their bows were wands, swishing them through the air while shouting nonsense spells. She smiled at the memory. How could she have forgotten that music could be playful too? The water rippled again, and the memory changed. She saw herself at her first recital. She was standing awkwardly in a stiff dress, her violin shaking slightly in her hands. The stage lights were blinding, and she had been certain that everyone in the audience could hear her heart pounding louder than her music. She had started with the wrong note, sharp, jarring, but she kept going, cheeks burning as she tried to recover. By the time she reached the middle of the piece, she had found her rhythm, her fingers moving instinctively along the strings. When she finished, there was a long, terrifying pause before the room erupted in applause. She remembered looking out into the audience and seeing her parents standing and clapping like they'd just witnessed a symphony. Her little brother, who had been forced to sit still through the performance, was holding up a crayon drawing of her with the words, "You did it," scribbled across the top. Another ripple. She was back in school again, standing with a group of friends in the music room after hours. They weren't supposed to be there, but nobody ever locked the door, and the thrill of sneaking in made it all the more exciting. They had been trying to create their own orchestra with the few instruments they could find. She remembered how her best friend had grabbed a triangle and declared herself the most important part of the band, striking it dramatically at random intervals. Someone else had discovered the piano in the corner and was banging out the opening chords to a pop song. And she had tried to play along on her violin, but she kept bursting into laughter every time they hit a wrong note. They sounded terrible, but it didn't matter. They were having fun, their music filling the empty room with a kind of joy that didn't care about being perfect. The water rippled again, and this time the image was of her now. She stood in the corner of her studio, surrounded by sheet music, her violin resting against the wall. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired, and her shoulders slumped as though she were carrying the weight of the world. She didn't look angry or broken, just lost. The music in her mind had always been her companion, but somewhere along the way it had become something else. A responsibility, a demand. She had forgotten the joy of playing, the lightness it once brought her. Her chest tightened as she watched herself, but before the feeling could overwhelm her, the water rippled once more. Now she saw herself in the future. She was sitting beneath a tree in the golden forest, her violin resting in her lap. Her hair was streaked with silver, but her face was calm, her expression serene. She wasn't performing or composing or worrying about her next piece. She was simply playing, her bow gliding across the strings in a way that felt effortless and free. The music wasn't for anyone else. It was for her. The dream felt like a message, not one of urgency, but of understanding. She didn't have to carry everything at once. Her music didn't have to consume her. It could be a part of her life, not the whole of it. It could be joyful, playful, imperfect. It could be enough. The lake shimmered one last time before fading into golden light. When she woke, the forest was bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The golden leaves above shimmered faintly in the morning light. Their brilliance softened, but no less beautiful. She sat up slowly, her body lighter than it had been in years. Her violin rested beside her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt no urgency to play it. She didn't need to force the music. It would come when it was ready. As she walked back toward the edge of the forest, she thought about the dream. The memories it had shown her weren't just reminders of the past. They were reminders of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. Her steps were light as she left the forest, the faint hum of its harmony following her. She knew the music would return to her, not as a storm, but as a gentle breeze, playful and free. The forest had given her a gift, not a song, but a sense of balance. And for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. Sometimes also, children visit us. A 5-year-old boy wandered into the forest one quiet evening, holding his favorite blanket in one hand and a scruffy stuffed bear in the other. He wasn't scared, he wasn't sad, he was just curious. His grandmother had told him stories about the Dreamkeeper's forest, about how its trees were alive and could whisper secrets to those who listened closely. She said the forest was magical, that it kept people's dreams safe and guarded them while they rested. He wasn't sure if he believed her, but he wanted to find out for himself. The golden leaves shimmered faintly in the moonlight, swaying gently in a soft breeze. The boy's eyes widened as he stepped closer. Everything looked alive. The trees were taller than anything he'd ever seen, their glowing branches stretching high into the sky. He stopped just inside the forest's edge and called out softly, "Hello?" The forest didn't answer, but the leaves rustled almost like they were saying hello back. His small footsteps padded quietly on the mossy ground as he walked deeper into the trees. He tilted his head back to look at the glowing leaves, his mouth open in awe. "You're so tall," he said to one of the trees, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you get so big? Do you eat a lot of food?" A golden leaf drifted down, landing gently on his head. He laughed, reaching up to grab it. "Thanks for the present," he said, tucking the leaf into his pocket. The boy wandered further into the forest, talking to every tree he passed. "Why do your leaves glow?" Are you all friends, or do some of you not get along?" He crouched down next to a tree's roots, running his hand over the cool, rough bark. "Do your roots talk to each other underground? Are you playing hide-and-seek with me?" The forest didn't answer in words, but he imagined it could hear him. The trees seemed to listen, their leaves swaying softly in response. When he reached a small clearing, the moonlight poured down like silver water, making the grass shimmer. He lay down in the middle of the clearing, wrapping himself in his blanket and clutching his bear tightly. "Okay," he said with a little yawn. "I'm going to sleep now. You can watch over me, okay?" The stars twinkled above, their light blending with the glow of the golden leaves. The boy's eyelids grew heavy, and soon he drifted into a dream. In the dream, the trees were alive in a way they hadn't been before. The tallest tree in the forest bent down to look at him, its bark forming a kind face with deep grooves for eyes and a wide grin. The tallest tree in the forest bent down to look at him, its bark forming a kind face with deep grooves for eyes and a wide grin. "Hello, little one," the tree said in a deep, rumbling voice. "You've come to visit us?" The boy nodded, clutching his bear tighter. "Are you real? My grandma said you could talk, but I didn't believe her." The tree chuckled. "Oh, we're real, all right. And we've been watching over you since the moment you stepped into the forest." Other trees began to move too, their golden leaves shimmering like stars. They leaned in closer, their branches swaying like arms, their trunks creaking as they spoke. "Welcome," they said in soft, melodic voices. The boy grinned. "Do you have secrets? Can you tell me one?" The trees whispered together, their voices blending into a sound like wind chimes. "Our roots stretch all over the world," one tree said. "We can hear everything. The earth talks to us, and we share its stories." "What kind of stories?" the boy asked, sitting up. "Happy ones," the tree said, "and sometimes sad ones too. But our favorite stories are about dreamers, like you." The boy followed the trees as they led him deeper into the forest. The golden light grew brighter and the air was filled with laughter, not scary or loud, but soft and playful. "Who's laughing?" he asked, looking around. "The forest," the tallest tree said. "We laugh when we're happy, and tonight you've made us very happy." They brought him to the biggest tree he'd ever seen. Its trunk was wide enough to fit his whole house inside, and its leaves glowed so brightly they lit up the entire clearing. "This is the Dream Keeper," the tree said. "It watches over the forest, over dreams, and over you." The boy stared up at the giant tree, his eyes wide. The Dream Keeper didn't speak, but he felt something warm wrap around him, like the softest hug. It was safe here. He was safe here. "Do you think I could stay forever?" he asked, his voice small. The trees swayed gently, their leaves brushing against his cheeks like a comforting hand. "You don't need to stay forever," one tree said. "You can come back any time. We'll always be here, waiting for you." When the boy woke, the sun was rising, casting soft light through the golden leaves. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and looked around. The forest was quiet now, but it still felt alive, as though it were watching over him. "Thank you for the dream," he said, standing and brushing off his blanket. "And thank you for keeping me safe." The trees swayed gently, their golden leaves rustling in response. It was as though the forest had heard him, acknowledging his gratitude with a quiet, loving hum. The boy turned and began walking back toward the edge of the forest, his little bear tucked under his arm. The mossy ground was soft beneath his feet, and the faint scent of pine and damp earth lingered in the cool air. As he walked, he hummed a tune to himself, a melody that wasn't from the dream, but one that felt like it had come from the forest itself. His heart felt lighter than it ever had before. His mind was full of wonder, brimming with questions and memories of the golden light, the talking trees, and the magical secret they had shared. He couldn't wait to tell his grandmother that the stories she'd told him were true. The golden leaves above swayed gently in the breeze, catching the sunlight in a way that made them sparkle. As he neared the edge of the forest, he turned back one last time. "Goodbye," he said, smiling up at the tallest tree he could see. "I'll come back." The forest seemed to respond, its leaves rustling softly, almost like they were saying goodbye in return. As he stepped out into the sunlight, the boy squinted, his eyes adjusting to the brightness. The world beyond the forest seemed ordinary by comparison. The same open fields, the same rolling hills, the same narrow path leading back to his village. But to the boy, everything felt different. The colors seemed brighter. The air smelled fresher. Even the sound of birds singing in the distance seemed sweeter. It wasn't the world that had changed, he realized. It was him. The forest had given him a gift. It had given him a sense of belonging, a feeling of being heard, and the knowledge that the world was far more magical than he had ever imagined. He walked slowly, his bare feet padding softly on the dirt path, savoring the feeling of the sun on his skin and the gentle breeze brushing against his cheeks. As he neared his village, he spotted his grandmother sitting on the porch, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked. She looked up as he approached, her eyes crinkling with a warm smile. "Well, there you are," she said, setting her knitting aside. "You were gone a long time, my little dreamer. Did you find what you were looking for?" The boy climbed up onto the porch and sat beside her, still clutching his blanket and bear. He looked up at her with wide eyes, his face glowing with excitement. "Grandma," he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. "The stories, you were right. The trees really do talk, and they told me a secret." His grandmother raised an eyebrow, her smile growing wider. "Did they now? And what was the secret?" The boy paused, frowning slightly as he tried to put the magic of the dream into words. "It wasn't just one secret," he said slowly. "It was a lot of stories about the earth and the roots of the trees reaching everywhere. And the trees said I could come back and hear more." His grandmother chuckled softly, reaching over to smooth his messy hair. "Ah, I knew the forest would take care of you. It's a special place, isn't it?" The boy nodded vigorously. "It's the best place, and I promised the trees I'd come back." His grandmother leaned back in her chair, her knitting resting in her lap. "You'll go back when the time is right," she said. "The forest is always there for those who need it." The boy leaned against her, resting his head on her arm. The hum of the forest still echoed faintly in his mind, like a melody that wouldn't fade. He felt safe, warm, and full of wonder, his imagination buzzing with the possibility of all the secrets he had yet to uncover. Years later, when the boy was no longer a boy but a young man, he would find himself thinking of the forest often. On quiet nights, when the world outside his window was still, he would remember the sound of the golden leaves rustling in the breeze, the warmth of the forest's light, and the deep, soothing hum of the dreamkeeper's voice. He would remember the stories and the way the trees had welcomed him without hesitation. And though the years would carry him far from his village and the edge of the forest, he would always find his way back. On those days, when the weight of the world felt heavy and his questions seemed too big for answers, he would step into the golden forest once more, feeling the earth beneath his feet and the light filling his heart. The forest would still be there, waiting for him, just as it always had. And as he walked beneath its glowing canopy, he would smile, knowing that some places, some dreams, stay with you forever.